In the next scene, David and I will discuss this graphic illustration of one individual's autistic traits in terms of challenges. This sample trait wheel helps emphasize that each different autistic person will have different traits and tendencies that can negatively affect them. It also helps demonstrate that a person's traits can vary in intensity throughout their lives, their days, and even within a day. Think of the lighter colored circles toward the center as indicating a less strong stage or instance of that trait or tendency, and then picture the situation moving toward the outside of the circles, toward the darker shades, as the trait potentially grows in intensity. The movement can, of course, also be in the other direction, going from strongly dominant to less so. When I use this white ball to further explain the autism spectrum, think of the core or the center within the ball or sphere to be where traits and tendencies start from, and think of them getting stronger and stronger as they reach the outer layer, the surface. Once they do, as you will see, they could be a larger, more dominant aspect of the person at that particular moment, or a relatively small one. Their size could grow or shrink, or, at times, a trait could become so little an aspect of the individual's life that it could go back under the surface, back toward the core, and not really be part of the person's experience for the time being. So we've just gone through some of the main traits that may be affected by an autistic individual and may be a greater or less part of their profile. And this sort of colored wheel, which I call a trait wheel, is a great way to represent the autism spectrum because, as we talked about earlier, autistic people don't have all the same traits. There's not a trait that you need to have to be autistic, but there are common traits that the ones that we went through tend to affect autistic individuals more often. And what the list that we went through is not even complete. So this trait wheel has room for 10, and I put on it my own probably top 10. Stimming, which we talked about, anxiety, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, word recall, and speech fluency as two different things, emotional regulation, executive function, depression, and sleeping issues. And at any given point, depending on the day or even within a day, for instance, my sound sensitivity or my word recall, I might be really great one day and not slip on my words at all, and other days that might be a real issue. Emotional regulation for me varies pretty much, and so some days I'm pretty good with that, and I can definitely slip into feeling dysregulated emotionally fairly easily. So to demonstrate even what I think is a more accurate visual for the autism spectrum would be a sphere, because while this is two-dimensional and only has room for 10 traits, if you picture a core on this sphere, here is a trait that on any given day is pretty large. This one isn't that big a deal this time or this day, but maybe it's going to grow. And here's one that's kind of middle size, and you can see that if this represented the brain of any one autistic individual, how many different traits and tendencies could be affected and how they could be larger or smaller depending on many factors. So David, if you look at my sample trait wheel, and it's not complete because I only had room for 10 traits. Would you say that these more or less, are there any maybe that would be on your trait wheel that aren't on mine?
There are a lot of similarities between yours and mine. I would remove sleeping issues. That's not a problem for me.
Good, that's good to hear.
But I would definitely drop in the autonomy, the desire to make my own choices and do things the way I want to do them. That's been a problem for me on a few jobs. Sound sensitivities is a big one for me. It's not so much the volume of the noise as it is the complexity of the noise. If I'm in a room and there's a half dozen groups of people having a half dozen different conversations, my brain will try to listen to all of them, and when it can't listen to all of them, it just says, well, never mind then, and listens to none of them. So even though there's all these conversations going on, I can't focus on anything. I can't hear anything at that point. So sound sensitivity is probably very close to the top for me. The executive function is a big deal for me. I've dealt with depression off and on for 20 or 30 years, so it's in there somewhere. But probably the sound sensitivity and the autonomy would be my two biggest.
So what's interesting, we would both have sound sensitivities on our wheel, but for me, I do experience what David experiences in terms of filtering out what I should be listening to or not. But he didn't mention, which is very much true for me, it gets to be an irritability.
Oh, yes.
I think what it is that I get nervous that I'm not hearing what I should be. If I'm on the phone and there's a siren in the background or it's a bad connection, I get very agitated and very anxious, and it sounds like irritability.
The airport's a tough one for me because I have all that noise and all those people talking out, all those announcements. There might be one that I need to hear. My plane might be taking off from a different gate, but I won't know that because I've tuned everything out.
Interesting, yeah. So even just within sound sensitivity, so many different layers, so many different possibilities. I wanted to mention that sound sensitivity is another one like emotional regulation, which has great level variety for me. There are certain days where it's not a big issue, but there's certain times of a certain day where, for instance, a crash sound on the television that I wasn't prepared for. I'm not the one watching the movie, so I'm not invested in the plot. Something like that can really be a large problem for me. Whereas on other days, I'm not as sensitive to sound. So a trait wheel really helps to demonstrate the autism spectrum, that we have some commonalities, but no two autistic people are going to have the same traits and tendencies and the same elevation of them on any given time.